And we have
So
any.
will you announce that?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, cool. So, should we start?
No. It's taking in all the participants. I'll tell you. We have 500 participants currently.
Okay.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing, Mithun.
That means your draw is huge.
सुबह से मेरे पीछे पड़ा हुआ है.
हाँ बोलिए.
वेबिनार.
हाँ किया ना मैंने किया. मैंने इसको हाँ पॉज रिकॉर्डिंग स्टॉप रिकॉर्डिंग मतलब चालू हो गया ना. ऑन माय कंप्यूटर किया मैंने. ठीक है. ओके.
राइट.
हाँ डॉली. हेलो.
यस.
हाँ ओके.
Dolly, Raksha, are we ready?
Almost, yeah. Still people are coming in.
No, I think we should wait for 5 minutes. 354 participants have come in and there are 521 altogether. So let that another.
Because it's 5:03, people will.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll wait for a few minutes.
Okay. So, Mithun, they were looking for Carrot Lane. Your Carrot Lane Butterfly, right?
Yeah, Carrot Lane Butterfly.
Correct.
It's our rooms are named after our best collections. So the room I'm in right now is Butterfly.
No wonder. She asked me that it says Carrot Lane Butterfly. I said, let me check.
Yeah.
This is a COVID haircut. Did you get?
What happened was my kids got stuck in Bombay, and so I was getting a earful every day from my wife. I told her that why don't one day is get a haircut or do something else, and she gave me a haircut which I looked like Kim Jong-un. So the only other option left was to shave my head after that.
Even I tried that. I tried, but it didn't work out as well. Yeah. Okay, Dolly, are we good to go?
Yeah, Milan bhai, we are good to go. We can start.
Okay, so hi everyone. This is Milan Chokshi. We're going to be talking about, how this lockdown is potentially showing us a growth map, or is it limiting our business? Our guest today is Mithun Sacheti. Needs little introduction, but I'll tell you a little bit about him. He is CEO of India's largest diamond and jewelry platform. Obviously comes from very high pedigree. So besides knowledge and skill, he's got culture and value of 5 generations. A gemology degree from GI and IIM alumni. So while he in some ways comes from a typical background, he has walked on a new path. Rather, he set a new path. At Carrot Lane, he is the strategist, innovator, and taskmaster. Typically in our industry, promoters and founders spend most of their time transacting at different levels, buying, selling, wholesaling. Mithun is obviously taking a different route. So his approach on everything is fresh and out of the box, and this has enabled him to take Carrot Lane to the position where it finds itself in. Mithun, I'm going to let you have the floor and speak about how you and Carrot Lane have used this lockdown and the challenges to kind of build a brand new organization for us.
Okay. Am I loud and audible, Milan?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So good evening to everybody. Very fascinating, very interesting times in any of our lives. I was talking to my granduncle, who's about 85 years old right now, and asking him how was this in the World War II, and he said actually this is far harder than that, because at least at that point we would be working from all day. We would be working. The shutdown really would be at night, and we wouldn't really close down any other time besides when the lights would go off at night and the sirens would come on. But in the day, it was as good as normal. There was really no change as such like that. So I asked him, but how do you think of this? And he had a very interesting take on it, and that's the take which I think influenced a lot of the thinking that at least all of us who make decisions at CaratLane, in some way or the other, that's what influenced us as well. So he said, let's think of this as somebody died in our family. What happens? That's the only time we stop working. We really have a 2-day break, and typically we have we have the funeral, and we have basically the dag, and then after that till the Uthavna happens, and after that we open the store, or rather open the keys so that we can get back to work. But from the 4th day to the 13th day, then we are obsessed about spending time with family. Visitors are coming, we're all doing that, and socially engaging with everybody. Everyone's trying to uplift the family out of a mood which could have been somber at that point. And post the 13th day, you see that everybody now starts to get back into work life. And if one had to relate this back to the business, it would essentially mean that the lockdown was the day where a death eventually happens. And the first week of the lockdown was a time when we really were somber, and we really don't even know how to react to it. We're saying work from home, that wouldn't work for us. We don't even know how to react. We don't know how cash flow will be. We don't know how many things are going to be. And that really would happen when a patriarch in a family dies as well also at that time. By the 4th day, which is the week 1, after week 1 is over, there's some semblance of what is going on. And you realize that what you really need to do now is not talk business, but socialize with everybody who's important. And I think many people have done that. I've heard many of the webinars here as well, and we were doing that. So we spent a lot of time talking to our vendors, to our partners in the franchisees, and to everybody literally. And then as we got closer to the end of week 2, a semblance of reality started coming in, saying that, there is a new reality coming in. We need to figure out how we're going to be ready for it. I was reading a very interesting line of, I think it's James Clear, which said, most businesses focus on planning for the finish line. This is one of but you should actually optimize for the starting line. And really, when you shut down like this, what you are working towards is planning towards the starting line. Because the day you're ready to do business, are you ready with every aspect of your business? And are you going to be ready to do, really go out there and run before everybody else? And that line was a very profound and powerful line for me, at least. We've, over the last 1 week, been engaging with our customers on Instagram. We've had, some concerts happen. We've had Zumba classes happen. We've had makeup sessions happen. Nothing to do with jewelry. Everything to do with just engage with the customer and really make him happy, make him cheerful about it. Because the fundamental belief still stays that for how many people are affected by COVID in terms of the actual disease itself, and that's possibly 100,000 people in this country, 150,000 people. Assuming that 1% of is the death rate and 400 people have died, you have 40,000 people on that. So there is 100 crore population in this country which is not affected, which is sitting at home. Out of that, 25-30 crore people are getting their salaries in their bank account every month they'll get it. They are not spending any money. They are having the time of their life, spending time talking to their family, to their friends, their parents, the kind of time they're spending on the internet. All of that is a quotient of happiness. And what really is jewelry? Jewelry is essentially a happy state of mind with money in the wallet. And if both these things are happening, at least a person in life who's hopeful like me does feel that we will come across stronger than this. Will the problems exist like cash flow? Will the problems exist of other things? For sure they'll exist. For the longest time we fought travel, right? Travel takes away such large chunks of money in the month of May and the month of December that really jewelry business goes through a massive slump in those 2 months. We've not adjusted our inventory or working style to that yet. But this is one time we're not going to be hit by that. I don't know anybody who's in a hurry to go to America right now, or anybody who's in a hurry to go to Europe right now. So if they're not going to be, there is disposable income sitting over there. We got to get ready to capitalize on those things. And whoever is fast and nimble on all of these things is going to enjoy benefits of this. We started off early. We at least believe that after the engagement phase was going on, you know, many jewelry stores do this. They will call people to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries in the store. Ultimately, you're calling them to spend money in the store. You're not really wanting to celebrate their birthdays and anniversary. And that's a cynical point that all of us have had for a long period as well. But this is the time to truly connect, because you could do the same exact thing in his house. Swiggy and Dunzo is working. You could send that to his house. You can get your store guys to be able to wish them at the same time, you know, over a WhatsApp call. And it would be such a selfless thing. The imprint that you leave on the customer is going to be far deeper than what you'd leave with anything else at this point. Very recently, our retail team started. I'm sure it's leaving an impact on the customers as well. When the 13-day equivalent arrives to our business, which at this point for e-commerce will be April 21st, and for retail, hopefully will be May 5th. When these 2 days arrive, there are a few things that we think we need to be careful of. One, customers will want hygiene and safety. We got to take care of that. Second, we got to be careful there's no demand destruction. So which means that our best foot has to come forward, and we must be ready to ensure that the customers, our customers are ready to, you know, when they look out there and they see fashion, they see jewelry, they see, luckily there's no travel, and they see all other categories at this point, we must also stand out as strong as every other category does. We have always stood behind. We have waited for demand to come to us. We have not gone out there and grabbed demand. In a starting line scenario, we have to go out there and grab demand, because if we don't do that right now, we will be the losers, and not because a customer went somewhere else. It's only because we just did not work towards demand at all. We waited for them to walk to us, and that story is over. That party is over now.
I mean, it's again, fresh thinking. You know, we've had so much media thrown at us that is generally very negative about everything. So it's refreshing to hear your take on this. So, Q, from what you said, how would you describe the modern jeweler that would probably emerge or survive this low point that we'll see for maybe the next 3 or 4 quarters? I mean, how would you describe a typically modern jeweler? Regardless whether it's a family jeweler or organized, because that's my next question, but how would you describe a modern jeweler post this situation?
Okay, so to talk about a modern jeweler, it's important to understand what is my definition of a traditional jeweler. My father, I hope he's not listening, is a traditional jeweler, and my granduncle is an even more traditional jeweler. They have always waited for the customer to walk in through their doorstep. They take pride in word of mouth business and waiting for that. Now, they built the jewelry, I mean, bulk of the jewelry business was built at a time where there was allocated money for jewelry purchase. It wasn't as discretionary as it has become today. And the way they went about it, it worked. Because when it's allocated, there's no problem with it. You're never going to lose that money. It's going to come to you. It's only a question of one jeweler versus another jeweler. The modern jeweler, in my opinion, cannot wait for allocated money, because the market is much larger now, and you got to go for the discretionary money. Discretionary money can come to your jewelry shop, can go to another jewelry shop, can go into travel, can go into mobile phones, depending on what is aspirational for that customer at that point. I don't know how many of you notice this. Every time Apple launches a new phone, you will see that consumption of other categories in US has gone down, because the chunk of money they take away from market itself. Similar instances happen in India. We just don't have data, but we can look around us and be able to figure that piece out as well also. We worry, the modern jeweler does not worry about synthetic diamonds. He worries more about, you know, where is my money going away? How can I get my customer? How can I reach in my customer's doorstep and be able to figure out before his demand is generated? The customer doesn't need to think about, this is my time to buy jewelry. When he's ready to buy jewelry, or rather when he's ready to spend money, jewelry as an option is presented to him like everybody else does, by the modern jeweler. To me, that is the single largest difference. Demand generation for the modern jeweler is an activity. For the traditional jeweler, demand generation was not an activity. Waiting for demand was the activity.
So do you think that the current organized players have an advantage over the family jewelers in this situation?
I'm going to break this question into 2 or 3 parts of the answer. If you look at the financial model of a large jeweler, you take, I'm going to talk about, take the top 3 players, and I'm not going to name them, everybody knows them. The number 1 player will have no financial difficulty in the system at all, because they will have sufficient money and everybody else and manage through that. The number 2 and number 3 players, and many people in this are from the jewelry industry, you can see that from where the payments are coming as well also, that you will see that those are the guys who are going to have difficulty in the system as well. So they definitely don't have an advantage over there on the financial side of it. Number 1 has, number 2, number 3 don't have that. Cascading effect to the number 4 to 10 number as well. So it gets worse as you go down that number. The family jeweler somehow manages his finances, and he's built a system which works. And in his own ways it works. The next piece is the piece of demand generation. All the organized players, by nature of quarterly reporting of their numbers, will focus on demand generation and go for it. All the traditional jewelers will wait to see what happens and then react to it. Anybody who's going to wait and react to it will be at a disadvantage. I wouldn't even say that that's traditional versus modern. I think it's just a reaction time. All those who have a slower reaction time will switch. By design, the family jeweler is the one who can react faster. Because what an entrepreneur brings to the table is what an organized player can never bring to the table. An entrepreneur can make decisions which for an organized player has to come only through processes. By the time you create a process rule book to get started in this, and I see that firsthand as well, the start has already begun for the entrepreneur at that point. So if the entrepreneur takes on the desire to build demand generation first, I have no doubt that he's at an advantage over the organized. But the question is that how many of us are going to go after demand generation?
So basically what you're saying is the world will now be not divided into organized or family, but into someone who's thinking on his feet and kind of reacting faster. So that would typically...
World's going to decide people on relevance. Are you going to stay relevant or not stay relevant as well? And your ability to change and make decisions will make you relevant. Big change happened, if you remember, in 2008. The guys who were 1 to 10 in the diamond business before 2008, maybe 2 or 3 of them exist. Everything else is taken away by a whole new set of guys who went after all the excess inventory De Beers brought out at that point.
So as you mentioned earlier, historically we've always failed in comparison to the draw of technology, accessories, clothes, designer clothes, watches, travel. There's this growing trend of conscious consumption. As an industry, what collective message, investment, store of value, weddings, these have been kind of used for years now. Is there a new collective message that would help us rise in this pyramid of wants or desire?
So 2 parts to the answer. There's the gold business, and it's, whether we like it or not, it stayed true to the investment thesis today. Anybody who has gold jewelry in their house is laughing to the bank right now. They made more money than anything else. Somebody bought a piece of gold jewelry in 2000 was at 320 rupees a gram. Today is 4,500 rupees a gram. So that's played out for them on that. And so I wouldn't say that they got it wrong. They were right on that part. On the diamond side of the business also, the numbers have risen from 2000 to now. So people have made that part. But I just don't feel that's the only way to sell something. And there's a very limited audience when you go after that as well. It doesn't drive consumption. It drives, you're selling a product from the thought process of scarcity. And it will work for a smaller set of population. If I was to give you a statistic on diamond jewelry, and this is obviously, we don't have published numbers on this, but this is what I've gathered from analyzing across. The number of people who buy diamond jewelry, which is greater than 2 lakh rupees in a year in this country, is only 6 lakh. The number of people who buy automobiles in this country in a year are 1 crore. So there's no, and we have residual value. And automobile, definitely it has no residual value at all. Automobile has 93% idle time. Jewelry has 99% idle time. So there is no reason to believe that they are doing anything better than we are doing except for communicating. So our ability to communicate and figure out the value proposition of our business for different reasons, for looking good or feeling good, and then residual value and all of this has always been challenged. We've stuck too much to, let's take diamond for example. We're so obsessed with converting every customer into a jeweler, right? We insist that he learn the 4 C's. The customer will never learn the 4 C's because he buys a solitaire once in 3 years or 4 years. There is no way he'll remember by the next time he comes back to buy as well. It's the same like he just does not know what a carburetor is in a car. He's never going to know that part. What he ultimately buys is the brand that he's buying from. He buys from a jeweler X and that is the brand that he's buying from. But the jeweler X is not realizing it's his brand that he's buying. He still thinks that it is the 4 C's which that customer is buying. Till we are obsessed about selling the specifications of a product, we will always struggle to have this sort of new generation or new demand coming across. Plus, at the same time, you dumb it down so much that it takes away all the margin out of the business as well. Also, it's a great entry strategy, but it's not a great growth strategy.
So what you're saying in a sense is that we should progress towards a more lifestyle kind of, hook rather than selling an investment product or a financial product.
Yeah, the biggest, this, right? The biggest campaigns across America were the tennis bracelet campaigns and all of that, which was built then, was built all around lifestyle. They were really not, in India, we figured out how to do the 4 C's bit and sell only the 4 C's and the Rappaport. Both of those things we sold in wholesale, which now, but there is a way, there's a higher order now, that we need to move towards as well.
So, another question, McKinsey in its 2020 State of Fashion update has identified innovation, building digital capabilities, and social commerce as important themes for the future. Which of these do you think, how would you rate them in our industry as 1, 2, 3? Which would be most relevant for jewelry retail?
I think innovation is going to be the number one for us right now. We have a serious challenge coming up. Gold is almost nearing 50,000 rupees. What the customer could afford when he thought it was 30,000 rupees, the look of that product is dramatically going to change right now. And if we don't innovate on the ability of building larger looking products at lower weights, we're going to really struggle, because what happens when people don't get a desirable product is they move asset classes.
Yeah.
And we run the risk of losing the asset class right now because we will not be able to understand how to build a product better for the customer, which at his wallet is still palatable for him as well. US lost gold entirely to silver. Diamond did not change that much because silver was consuming the diamond part, but gold has a very strong connection to India. And that part of it needs to be sustained and needs to stay as well also. So for it to stay relevant, still be a part of every wedding and do everything else, I think innovation is very, very important. Social commerce, luckily rate of change is lower in the jewelry business, so you can always catch on to it. You're never going to lose out on that part, and we'll continue to build on that. So I don't see that as such a big challenge as well. Fashion, depending on price point, you will always see at the lowest price point, fashion plays a very large role. At the higher price point, contemporary plays a very large role. So, and fashion's always stayed in the jewelry business. It's not something that's going to go away from it at all. So if I was to build an expensive hoop, I know I'm going to be contemporary. If I'm going to build a cheap hoop, I know I'm going to get fashionable. Yeah. We'll continue building that part. Jewelers have a very good sense of that.
Yeah. And on all of these three, how do you think, well, not only on these three, but how do you think, we can collaborate? So CaratLane's views on collaborating better with, say, your vendors and your customers. How do you think post this you can collaborate? How would your collaboration differ now? You already explained how you engage with your customers in some ways, but with your suppliers, for example, how would you, motivate them? How would you change the way you operate?
The first piece of motivation right now for us is to make sure everybody gets paid all of April. Because everybody doesn't get paid in April, the salaries of employees working in factories is a problem. And I think this is an industry problem that everybody must need to recognize. It's very easy for jewelers to sit at home and say that I have no incoming and so I cannot send it out. But it has a very, very big cascading impact across as well. if the guy goes back to his village and does not plan to come back, we're all going to struggle to even make product after this as well also. So first piece is to make sure that we pay everybody on time and we get that part going. If April is taken care of, everybody will understand in May and June that, because once you've paid that, that's fine, everything will fall into place. We work very closely with our partners. I think it's almost like they are in our office and we are in their office working very, very closely. We work with a very small set of partners as well. I think totally we have like 10 vendors, for a business that does 750 crores of studded sales. That's not a very large vendor base to have as well also. Innovation or innovating with them is something only possible when we work with a smaller set of people. It is not possible when you work with 200 people. That's merchandising. You can go out there and pick up what you think is right for your store and do that part. That works for some people, but collaboration will not work in that. But if you really want good product to come out, we need to flesh out the credit cycle of the industry itself. If people spend so much time on figuring out when money will come and when money will go, innovation will never happen. We need to move to, instead of, I'm saying if people ask for 60 days credit, tell them take 75, but give me a post-dated check. We just need to move towards systems like that so that we are in a much better position to be able to solve our business problems. The mind space of the entrepreneur needs to go in creation. It is not going in creation right now. It's entirely going in financial management.
Correct. Yeah. Last question, then I'm going to throw it open for questions from everyone else. The facts are India has, because besides the domestic retail business, we also have an Indian diaspora, we have an export industry, we have a huge manufacturing base. We also have 9 out of 10 diamonds. We have skilled artisans, we have culture, we have engineers, we have the youth, and we have an affinity for jewelry. It becomes, as GJPC and for the leaders of the industry, it's evident that maybe Italy and China will be disadvantaged for different reasons. Italy for social reasons, China because of perception. This could be a huge opportunity in our industry, right? I mean, and what is the best way, what is the message that you want to convey to young designers or, young companies that want to start out in this business?
The first thing I tell a young company is don't depend on casting. We have overdone the same methods and technologies that we go after. What we need to figure out is why is it that people buy from China and Spain when the raw material is easier to source from India? Diamonds are cut in India, color stone is cut in India, gold is equally available in every part of the world, skill set labor is available cheaper in India. Why is it that they still buy from there? It's for only one fundamental reason: the quality of product is superior. The gap between our product and the gap between a European product is massive, even today. Till we are not able to bridge that gap, there is no question of us replacing them. We can feel excited that we'll replace them, but we are too far away right now because we don't focus on that. We're so obsessed with selling diamonds and not jewelry that we just don't improve in the way we make jewelry.
Yeah. No, makes sense. Thank you. This has been awesome. We're going to open it up to questions. Dolly, are you?
Sorry, I don't know whether there's the right answer for council, but still, that's just how I mean.
Sure, we have some council members listening to this. So, Dolly, will you pick up the question?
I'll take the question. So, Mithun, there's a question who says, how do you maintain hygiene in jewelry which is handled and delivered by multiple people in the process?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How will you maintain hygiene in the delivery of jewelry going forward?
So is jewelry first thing. So it doesn't get contaminated the way, many other things get contaminated as well. Secondly, a lot of hygiene is also how you build perception around, how you think around it. If you were to walk into a CaratLane store today, every time a customer tries a pair of earring, after that somebody sanitizes the post. These are very little things that happen as well. It's not got to do with COVID. It's been happening from the time we started as well. But all these little things make a big difference in that. We were now discussing how do we do that for rings as well also. How do we make sure that for every aspect of these things, we are able to think through, if you put yourself in the customer's shoes and say, hey, where do I see risk in terms of contamination? Where do I see risk in terms of what could transfer across to me? We will find answers to each one of these things and be able to solve it. The entrepreneurial mind, all it requires is questions. The answers is the easy part in the business.
Correct.
Okay. Another question is, will online presence and social media marketing help our business going forward?
Well, I don't specifically know your business, but in my opinion, if you are in anything that builds desire, or desire is an important part of selecting what you do, that's what that's essentially what online mediums do. If you consider yourself walking through a trade show, what you're doing walking booth to booth really is looking for desirable products. The same thing you're replacing from there and taking it onto an online platform where the customer is able to do the same thing sitting in his house. Now, how to transact on that, you can take it offline as well. But as long as you can build the discovery there, I think you would have achieved a lot in growing the business.
So on that line, Mithun, I have a question. Hypothetically speaking, say someone comes up with the concept of a trade show, which is a virtual B2B event. Do you think, as CaratLane, you would be open to a format like that? Do you think it has advantages or disadvantages over current format of trade shows?
So, last 3 days, I was attending a Singularity conference, which I was telling you about. Yeah. And I'm amazed to tell you that I met at least 70, 80 people who had a FaceTime, just hello, hi, how are you? They had a room called networking, where they pair you with people based on the attributes you left behind as well. And you naturally start talking to them. And these are guys from all over the world, and that was happening. I attended some 20 sessions, maybe 5-10 minutes each one of those, depending on my interest on the topic as well also. And I was able to do that. Now, whether product discovery will be most efficient through that, maybe not, but definitely understanding of what kind of work you do and what kind of product is there. And I'm sure we can find a solution through apps for that, for discovering the products as well. And it's far more controlled because you can control the room in which who's allowed to enter, who saw how much, who saw in what detail, and you're able to do that. I think a virtual trade show is better than a physical trade show.
No, because travel and trade shows are a significant cost today for most businesses. It's good.
It's a mindset shift, and habit changing is not easy. But over a period of time, I think instead of having 3 Hong Kong shows, there's no reason why there should be 1 Hong Kong show and 2 virtual Hong Kong shows. Or 1 IIJS and 1. Winter IIJS can become online itself also.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a question for you, Milan Bhai. Somebody's put down, if we start selling loose diamonds or jewelry at huge discount to get out of this slow market, will it help?
Mithun can also give an answer to that, but my opinion is initially, given that our industry typically has huge inventories, initially it might make sense for some businesses to create cash flow because that is critical in today's time. So some amount of discounted selling, strategic discounting selling would help any business, not only the jewelry business, but it would help any business. So yeah, I think, as long as you're strategic about what you sell at a discount, I think it's okay. Your opinion?
At this point, there is only one management. There's no revenue management because there is no sales. So there's only liquidity management. So if you need to sell something to manage your liquidity, fair enough. But long term, losing money and selling a diamond is a shortcut to failure, basically. So it's not really something, and it's not a product where you really need to discount into it because cost of capital is not so expensive in the diamond business either. So I don't see that as a long-term strategy, but definitely as a short-term today, a lot of people might need to do that just to have a clean slate and to be able to move forward from there.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking, if all of India's diamond manufacturers, got together and decided that they don't want to sell a particular size or quality below a certain price, given that we have 95 out of 100 diamonds, there's really no option for the international buyer or any buyer for that matter. They'll have to pay the price that we want. There is no other supplier today.
Yeah. Cartelization works in cement. Why not in diamonds?
Yeah.
So Yeah, another one. Do you think people would be more comfortable buying jewelry online now post-COVID?
No, I mean, look, I mean, the market share of online is still so small. For someone to think that that will shift there entirely is I mean, I would love it, but it's not going to happen. And because there are still lots of frictions in between, and the value at which an average jewelry sells is much, much higher. So I don't see that happening as well. But I do feel that jewelers need to do a lot more to be able to compete with other categories by making sure they use all the resources available for which the consumer is using at least. If advertising was on hoardings, newspapers, it's important to consider doing that on social media platforms as well, especially to your limited base, which is the followers that you have on Instagram or Facebook, if nowhere else, because your customers are coming to know what designs you're making and what's something new that you're coming up with. People should make closed rooms for their customers.
So okay. A lot of people are asking this question on, because you had a comment on casting. So a lot of people are asking why no casting, or what was that in context?
So, I mean, my view on casting is that one, it has very low skill set requirement. You could do this, you know, that Mittiga casting from there all the way to Indutherm and all the fancy machines as well also. Very low value add comes across. The second problem I have is that as gold rate keeps going higher and higher, any technology which makes metal weight higher is going to be a problem as such. So technologies that make metal, a larger look for metal at lower weight, I think are going to take off a lot more. So that's my view on casting. Nothing to do with just specific to casting, but at least maybe 3D printing plus casting or electroform plus casting. Something you got to add to it. You can't just be doing the same exact thing. I remember when I graduated from GIA, my professor told me this story about he met a jeweler for 20 years back who had graduated, and he asked him, what did you do? I mean, how the last 20 years been? He said, I'm in the same job. On day one, I was making wedding bands, and today also I make wedding bands. So he asked him, so how has it been different? He said, nothing, it's exactly the same. So what he really was doing was one day of his life, 20 years over, and he added no value to it. So he exactly was where he was. And as market shifted, he went out of job at some point as well. So we can't sit and wait for gold to go to 60,000, then think what will happen next and react to it. We need to start working today for that, assuming it will go to 60,000.
Yeah, because I mean, there is a possibility that gold could go up, and there'll be some, you know, buyback situations, which again retailers will have to kind of figure out how they want to tackle.
Yeah, that buyback is a very dangerous thing that we are sitting on.
Yeah. So if you had a choice to go back in the past, would you change that situation of having this buyback scheme?
We do an 80% exchange. Yeah. So, which we've taken recently a 90%, I think, something like that. But exchange is safer than buyback is. But it's the only country in the world that does it. So, and it comes from the fact that we claim it as an investment product, right? So
it comes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not something that one person can change. It has to be cartelized change.
Yeah, cartelized. I like cartels.
You're watching too much of Mexican dramas.
Not that kind of. Dolly.
Yeah. So, how much time do you think it'll take for the jewelry business to come back to normalcy?
So, assume that the jewelry business falls down by 10%. You know, leave out the first quarter. It's gone. Up to June, you're going to see literally no business, and that's fine. That happens. This is a lifetime event for all industries, and that'll happen. And for the rest of the year, if it falls by 10%, the only urge I'll leave you with is, why should you be the one who lost 10%? You can take your neighbor's share and really go after that business as well. And so growth will depend on your ability to be relevant and start off aggressively. It doesn't depend on market to go up or go down. No single player in this market has even 5% market share. So no one person can claim that I lost market because the market degrew. It only lost because I didn't become more relevant for my customer.
So there's another question, which is again connecting to something you said earlier about lab-grown diamonds or natural diamonds. So you said that's not relevant as a conversation. Similarly, do you think gold would get replaced by other metals, other, kind of base metals, silver, platinum, anything.
So,
Do you see that trend?
Milan, I used to think about that a lot before, until one day I realized that what I am is a jeweler.
Yeah.
And trend is something that the what appeals to a customer. So my job is to keep dipsticking and giving options to customers, and the trend that sticks, the jeweler should adopt.
Got it.
So
Got it.
I should not be married to gold. I should not be married to diamond. I should not be married to synthetics. I should not be married to silver or platinum. I should be married to trend. And my job is to keep checking for which trend is going to stay relevant, and then make sure I'm the king of that.
Okay. There's another question about, try at home, jewelry at EMI, all these, sales methods beyond just product and, salesmanship that could possibly also become important tools to grow business. What is, someone wants to know what your opinion on these are.
Yeah.
How much of a difference do they make?
They make a big difference. I mean, try at home is nothing but my grandfather's way of selling, right?
Yeah,
going to a customer's house and selling that jewelry. Coined today beautifully as try at home. The number of stories we've heard about dabba mein leke jate the, and he used to take it to somebody's house and show it across over there, is effectively a modern way of selling is try at home. So we're really going back and saying that multi-channel retailing, try at home is another option available in that. As far as EMI goes, every category. So I'll give you a data which came out on Chroma. Chroma's business over a 2-year period had grown about 8-9%. While the business grew 8-9%, the EMI usage grew 45%. Or not 45%, it grew to 45%. So 45% all products sold in Chroma were sold through EMI. So if consumer demands EMI, as an industry, we have no choice, but we'll also have to make it available. Otherwise, demand will keep shifting from jewelry to other categories which are able to provide that. So instant gratification without having money in your pocket is a situation that we'll be in. And at $72, or rather 15% of our GDP in credit right now, and US at 70% of its GDP is in credit. The gap is fairly wide. So I do see people will start borrowing a lot more for buying various assets as such. The only difference though is our cost of credit is 12% and theirs is 3%. So from a cash flow basis, it does hurt the customer, but that's for, RBI to think about and not us. Yeah.
Okay. Many people have asked, what do you see, as a change in customer behavior now, given that 9 out of 10 customers that we have today are women? That's basically asking, do you think women will change? And you can answer this seriously, you can answer it from personal...
No, so I'll answer it seriously because we have a business to run, all of us, and we must share our views. So I do believe that in the first 3 months, there will be a change. And the first 3 months will be a time to build your brand with customers on that. After 3 months, they'll go back to being their old self because we would have also found some, if not 3, maybe 6 months, we would have found some solutions around all of this. And we will figure that piece out as well also. But for the first 6 months, that we are sensitive to that, their desire to change, that we are sensitive to making sure everything is sanitized, that we are sensitive that if they don't wish to visit the mall, but we'll visit them. All of these things we need to take care of, because if we don't do that part of it, somebody else will take our share. Then the growth, degrowth won't be 10%. For some, it will be 25%, and for some, it will be growth of 20%.
Yeah. I mean, we're always sensitive to what women have to say, and so a little more. But they will go back to.
I do feel it'll go back. Yeah.
Go back to being the way they are.
Yeah, humans are way too social to be confined in spaces.
Yeah.
For humans, jail is a punishment, and for animals, we put them in a zoo anyways and don't think it's a punishment, right? So we're very different that way.
Yeah. Dolly, any?
Yeah. What do you recommend for the startups in this industry at this point of time?
I mean, you're the most nimble-footed, smart guys, youngest, who are going to be out there trying to build something. if you learn the basic tenets of business, that to manage cash flow, this is the industry which has a low rate of change. So you don't have to lose money to build a business. That's a mistake I made. And I would not want everybody else to go through that part of it and do it, because it doesn't change that fast. It takes its own time to build itself. So if you are willing to wait for your rate of change, if you're willing to innovate and try something different and do it, customer will always pay you back for it. Only thing focus on is solving a customer problem. Don't build something just because you want to build it. Just because you built it, it's not a birthright that the customer will buy it. He will only buy it because he believes you solved a problem for him.
The last one, I guess. Do you think post-lockdown, will customers go for more of old gold exchange or go for new purchases of jewelry in case of weddings, considering the current scenario?
If people had the money, they would go for new, because when a price of gold is rising and everybody is making money, it's hard to imagine they'll come out and sell. If you see the run of 30,000 to 40,000 rupees when gold went up, old gold exchange and grammage did not grow that fast. And that was one of the reasons why there was literally no growth in the jewelry business, because old gold drives a lot of exchange and thus drives a lot of behavior. I mean, a lot of sales in the business as well also. So when that proportion fell down, that was a degrowth that many people experienced as well. But right now there's a different scenario that people might be short on money as well. And if they have a wedding in hand, they might do old gold exchange and go with that. So it's going to come down to individuals and kind of manage that. There was one question that I kept seeing come up, was synthetic versus natural. And they kept asking, what is the future of synthetic on this? I have one simple view on it. Today, for every 1 lakh people who look for a natural diamond online and Google search, if they do, there are 800 people who are looking for synthetic. If you were to go to BKC and talk the same exact question in the boards, for every one person who looks at natural, 1% talks about synthetic. So it's a problem of Bombay. It's not an India problem right now. So really, it's not a large enough opportunity in India right now in the true sense. And changing that habit again is a very long drawn out process as well. So if you're willing to wait and build that business over a 10-year horizon, please by all means do it. But don't think that it's going to gallop from tomorrow morning and some big change is going to happen, because search data will first tell you what customers are looking for.
Correct. There's also another question which keeps coming back, and I think, maybe this is, we can consider this to be the last one, is design and IP. It's something that in India, and this better than I do, protecting design, intellectual property hasn't been either. A, there's no respect for it in most cases. B, it's never on top of mind for even producers. Even people who are making original designs don't realize that there is a mechanism and a process through which you can kind of defend your designs, secure your product innovations. Because while we do encourage people to go into the innovation, on the innovation road, you also need to be able to protect all that you create. So,
yeah.
Could you summarize for everyone who's listening how easy or difficult it is today in India, and what could possibly change that?
So there are two things. There is innovation and there is different design. Two very, very different things. Innovation is where you actually found a new way of doing something and you can get a patent on it and be able to do that. On a design, all you can get is a copyright. The copyright will last you for the first 50 output that you make, and it's not going to last beyond that. That's how the law states it. On when you do some
50
innovation,
for jewelry is good. Sorry to cut you, but 50 for jewelry is a big number.
Oh, it's a bad design for us if it sells only 50.
Yeah, so, sorry, not for you.
So think about all the gold guys, right? They sell it like hundreds and thousands across.
Yes, of course,
yeah. So if you have a process patent or a tech patent on that part of it, you've done some innovation on that part, definitely it makes sense to go after it. But in terms of design patent, I would focus more on trying to, because the minute you go for reach, that you're going to go after try and sell more number of people, you're going to hit 50 very fast anyways.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. There's a collection we have called Butterfly. Same design, same everything, from silver manufacturers to CZ manufacturers. Everybody copies it, names it the same thing, puts it up across on Amazon and everywhere. I sell at 22,000. They sell the same product 300 rupees. Nothing I can fight about, nothing I can do about it. I'm sure they sell just as much as we sell as well also. But that's life in India. And we will back our ability always to come up with new things all the time, because the new order of the world is to expose product a lot more than we used to expose before. And if you're going to do that, the perils of that is that you're going to have copies against it as well also.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mithun. It's been awesome. I think we've tried to stay positive throughout the conversation. And that's, I think, what everyone needed. So fantastic. Thanks for.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
See you, Milan. Bye.
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you.